Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Katie, a member of the CK12 team, and my colleague Lindsay and I will be running today's webinar, Getting Started with FlexBooks. We're so glad you've joined us this afternoon.
Before we get into today's content, I'd like to go over a few logistics about the Zoom webinar platform to make sure everyone is getting comfortable using all of the different windows. You should see two different options on your Zoom screen, one for Q&A and one for chat. During our presentation today, whenever you have a question about CK12, please post it in the Q&A window. We're going to pause for a Q&A session after each major topic to address any questions that have been submitted. The chat window is where we'd like you to have a community conversation. Looks like some of you have jumped on to already say hello and hi. You are welcome to tell us maybe where you're joining us from, what state or what country, even a district or the subject that you teach. Just make sure when you're trying to use the chat window that you send your messages to all panelists and attendees. You have to change it to say all panelists and attendees if you want everybody to be able to see what you're posting. Also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you are having any trouble with your video or your sound, please let us know in either of these windows.
Thanks, Lindsay. Now let's start talking about FlexBooks. I'd like to find out a bit more about you and your interests to help us tailor this presentation accordingly. You'll see a poll here in a few seconds that will prompt you to respond to two short questions. And those questions are, have you used and or customized a CK12 FlexBook? Feel free to select any that apply to you. So if you both use them and customize them or built them from scratch, kind of check all that apply as you go through. And then the second question is, what are your printing requirements for using FlexBooks? And this is based on a lot of conversations we've had recently on whether or not you as a teacher might need a printed copy for a particular student or for your whole class for various reasons. And so this will just help us kind of figure out the best way to move forward in this webinar, as well as kind of with the resources that you're accessing. So with that, I'll give you a few seconds to kind of try to answer both of those questions in the poll, and we'll go from there.
Okay, answers are flooding in, Katie. Let's see, should we give them another 10 seconds here?
Yeah, wrap up the last couple things, pick those answers, and then we will share those results. Okay, I think with that last call for answers, we're going to close the poll and then pop up those answers so we can talk about them for a second. And it looks like the majority of you haven't used CK12 FlexBooks, so this is the perfect session for you. You're getting started. Some of you guys have seen them and used them but haven't customized them, so we will go through the basics of that as well. And then a couple of people in here have started to customize and maybe even built a FlexBook from scratch. So hopefully you'll learn some new pieces of information today, some best practices, and a couple other pieces as you work your way through this webinar. And then it looks like there's kind of a spread in terms of people that have now been able to move all digitally. And so some of our newest interactive pieces that don't work offline will be fantastic for you. And then others that are required to have a printed copy, or it would be super helpful, but it's not a requirement. And so kind of as we go through our different resources, I'll make sure to point out which ones will be accessible and usable for each of those different types of users. So I think with that, we will move forward on this particular session.
Sure, so like Katie just said, today is called Getting Started with FlexBooks. So for those of you who are brand new to FlexBooks, or perhaps those of you who've used our FlexBooks but never really customized, this really is a great place for you to get started. So during today's webinar, we're going to be covering the following topics. We're going to talk about, as soon as I can get my keynote presentation to work here. Okay, technical glitch here. Let me, there we go. Let me try this again. I know there's bullet points on the screen. Okay, you guys can see it now. During this presentation, we're going to talk about why choose a CK12 FlexBook, what features make CK12 unique, and why customizable and shareable content is so important to educators. We're going to talk about finding a FlexBook in CK12 content, navigating CK12 defined concepts, original FlexBooks, concept collection FlexBooks, and even our new 2.0 FlexBooks, as well as user-generated content. We're going to talk to you about customizing a FlexBook, basics of editing, how to delete, reorder, add, upload content, as well as best practices for working collaboratively with our books. And then publishing and sharing your FlexBooks, how to get your books in the hands of colleagues and students through the unique URL, the schools page, the ShareOplane, and the offline reader.
So by the end of this session, you will be able to find a FlexBook that you can customize yourself, start a new one from scratch if you want, actually customize them, add in chapters, sections, change or add the chapter descriptions. You can reorder, you can delete sections or chapters. We'll even talk about some basic edits and then how to publish and share your FlexBook. And then the last couple of pieces will be kind of understanding best practices when collaborating with colleagues. So just kind of making sure that you're all working together and coming up with the best option and not stepping on each other's toes. And then kind of throughout the course of this, thinking about how you could successfully use FlexBooks with students with that publishing and sharing piece.
Okay, so everything we're going to talk about today is available on what we call our session resource page. So we've made a bunch of these resource pages for all of our different webinars, and you can access it at the tiny URL that's printed at the top of the screen. We'll also put it out in the chat window, but it's tinyurl.com/CK12FlexBooks. And this is just a two-sided handout that's going to have a lot of the information that Katie's going to talk about today. So if you're not ready to, start building your FlexBook tomorrow and, you need to reference this handout in a couple weeks, couple months, whenever it is, it's there for you for some tips and reminders.
So one thing to just kind of remember is that this session is called Getting Started with FlexBooks. We do also offer an advanced FlexBook editing session. We will be offering that in October this year, as well as kind of in the past. So you can check out that recording if you want to get to it even before then. But that one covers a number of kind of the advanced topics. So it covers uploading, editing, and adding attributions for images, our different options for images, figure versus inline, more on our CC by NC licensing, embedding videos and multimedia content, our math editor, using our MathJax or LaTeX coding, linking to interactives, embedding interactives, using headers and subheaders, and all sorts of fun formatting, tables, element boxes, page breaks. And then last but definitely not least is if you are using a printed PDF version of our book, what that would look like and how that might be different than if you're using an on-screen view of that. So I think with that, we will answer questions if you have questions on these particular topics, but we will prioritize the ones for the basics just to make sure that those that are here for that session get their questions answered first. But we'll always stay on and answer any kind of more specific questions if you have them. So no worries there.
So probably the first questions that we should address are the obvious ones of why choose a FlexBook and what even is a FlexBook. And many of you are here today because you're looking for something to replace your traditional textbook, a textbook that's expensive and weighs 10 pounds and is outdated as soon as it hits your shelf, and a textbook that isn't really made for your state or your students. It doesn't follow the sequence of concepts that you teach your class. So now that you've decided that's outdated, how can you replace those books but still have quality curriculum to give your students? Google Docs can help address many of these needs and allow for customizability. A system of folders and handouts isn't a single source of content though. So something like a FlexBook really binds it all together. Even the name FlexBooks, which is derived from a combination of textbooks and flexibility, brings to mind the idea of making your text exactly what you need it to be to teach your students your way, on your timeline, and in your price range, because everything on CK12 is free, totally free. One example of that is our Coeur d'Alene School District in Idaho. Their teams work to customize CK12 content, and then they add in their own content in a sequence for their school. Then the following year, they come back together and they make some updates to their books and easily get the newest versions immediately in the hands of their students.
So I have often had teachers ask about accessing our content, and they usually start with something like, our classroom has iPads or Chromebooks or Kindle Fires or some sort of device that they're working off of. And will CK12 work on those devices? With our idea of kind of accessing content and learning anytime, anywhere, and on any device, we've worked hard to make sure that you can read CK12 FlexBooks on a laptop, tablet, or even a mobile phone. Plus, our Chrome reader and the app that goes with our FlexBooks allow for offline use for all but our kind of newest fully interactive digital books, which for them, they just make the most sense online. So to access these books or your own customized version, you can always use the unique URL for that book directly and share that with your students. And then they can log in as well for free, and they'll have complete access to not only your text, but also all of the resources that we offer on CK12 for free.
Yeah, we keep mentioning the word free, but I want to make sure that you know, while we don't charge for any of our content, you can still be assured that our FlexBooks are of the highest quality. To write our FlexBooks, we follow a model similar to the traditional publishers. Our content has been developed by hundreds of people with PhDs, people who are professors, teachers, authors, even NASA scientists, and other subject matter and domain experts. And they've been working on this for the past 11 years. If you're interested, you can see a list of our authors on the Meet the Teams page. So while we are like traditional publishers in the creation of our content, the benefits of using a CK12 FlexBook include not only the ability to customize content, but the chance to bring to life with the inclusion of other modalities. Our simulations, our Plix interactives, our videos, and other resources. They're available to make your books come alive. Another thing that you can do with our FlexBooks is translate them into another language. We have some Spanish editions of FlexBooks built on our site by human beings who actually translated it. But this Google Translate option that you're going to see at the bottom of CK12, you have the ability to change any of our read content, any of our text content into almost any language. And Google Translate keeps getting better and better and better. I don't know if you've tried it recently, but it's a pretty close translation that I think is going to help any students who come to your classroom and may still be speaking a language that you need to support through Google Translate. Recently, we've even begun working with teams around the world to translate our simulations, making them currently available in Korean, German, and Chinese. So we continue to work on this, making our content more accessible with different languages. Sometimes when we're in classrooms talking about FlexBooks, you know, a concern can be with a digital textbook that students lose out on the option to write in the margins or to highlight in a book. And maybe you can tell what's going on in this photo here is that we have a highlighter tool. And so this student is actually selecting a color and highlighting a sentence. And then all of these highlights and even notes that the student can take right there on the screen, they're going to be saved to that student's account and always accessible anytime they're logged into CK12.
So I think now might be kind of a good time to show you, this is our testimonials page where we share a lot of the kind of clips that we have. But I think we're going to move from there and actually show you some of the footage that we've gotten to highlight using FlexBooks in Utah, Texas, Tennessee, and Idaho. And you'll even get a glimpse of our executive director and co-founder, Neera Khosla, who started CK12 back in 2007 to radically change the old textbook model.
I love learning, and I actually really love books. But the problem with textbooks is that they are actually very limiting format, and not every child can learn from that. Textbooks are created to be average, so you cover almost every kind of student. The problem is that that doesn't work for every student. That's why we created FlexBooks. These are textbooks that are current, customizable, and of course, free.
We would be flat as teachers if we weren't always asking ourselves, what's in the student's best interest? What's going to be down the tunnel for them? Down the tunnel for them is less and less printed textbooks and more digital resources. And I'm not preparing them for their futures if I'm not learning how to use those resources as well.
CK12 was an obvious choice for us. We were able to experience some cost savings with it. The content is rich, it's engaging to students, and it's flexible, so it allows us to really tailor the tools to meet the needs of the instruction.
We can embed multimedia components to make it more engaging for our students, to make it more relevant for our students, so that they're no longer using a static textbook, but one that's dynamic and rigorous and high quality and easily updated. Teachers can go and find a textbook that meets their needs, and they can constantly revise and edit as they go along.
CK-12 actually meets and exceeds the standards that are required by our curriculum, our state and district curriculum.
I didn't realize that something as simple as online textbooks could change the way that I teach that much, but it's been pretty much a door that has opened that I can't close anymore.
If I were speaking to someone that was considering the CK-12, I would say don't hesitate because of just the savings and just the practicality of it, but the current information and the ease of use with our students who are engaged with technology, there's just nothing else out there like it.
Hopefully that helps you get a sense of, how our books are being used in different classrooms across the country. I feel like it's always nice to hear from actual teachers and administrators who are using the books. Right now, Katie, maybe you've had a chance to check out the Q&A. It's still early, so for you guys who are thinking of questions, you can type them in the Q&A window, and we'll pause again throughout. But is there anything you want to field right now, Katie?
Yeah, we seem to have a couple of questions kind of on integration and kind of accessing classes and what that looks like. Our FlexBooks, in terms of text-wise, they're built in our system, but in terms of accessing and using them, we are integrated with a number of learning management systems, particularly Google Classroom, Canvas, and Schoology are kind of the biggest integrations that we have where you can share content and get grades within those systems. So if you're using one of those, definitely check out the options for that. Join us for a webinar specifically on those integrations. If you're trying to use CK-12 classes, you can share a class code with your students, and then they would log into CK-12 and go to classes, and they would add that code just kind of like they would if they were going to add a class in Google Classroom or something like that. But if you are using a learning management system as your primary system, then I recommend you do all of those pieces within that system if it is integrated with CK-12. And we'll talk about kind of sharing content a little bit. More of the assigning pieces are covered in our Getting Started with Practice and Assignments session that will be next week. So definitely join us for that if that's something you're interested in doing. So I think we are looking for, it looks like there's one other thing about student access. Students can access CK-12. They can just go to ck12.org, and they can, if you have a Google or Microsoft email address, they can log in directly with that. They don't even need to create a new password. They can go on, and a lot of our content they can just browse as is, and then once they're starting to use customized content or interactives or practice, they would need to actually do that full login and go from there.
All right, Katie, I know that you're going to probably start by showing them how to navigate our site. So for you guys who are kind of new to CK-12, Katie's going to show you how you start finding the content. But before we do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about our books, because you are going to find a variety of books when you get to CK-12. And sort of the simplest way to start this process is that you don't have to create a book from scratch. You can take one of our existing books, click customize, rename it, and then you can share a URL right away. But some of you are still, hey, well, which book should I start? How should I choose? So let me talk to you about some of our resources here. When CK-12 first started, so this is back in 2007, we launched a line of FlexBooks that, while customizable, were pretty similar in scope and sequence to a more traditional textbook, okay? So this meant that while customizable, they were optimized for offline use, kind of like a pre-existing paper book. Each section of our first FlexBooks generally covered multiple skills like any other text, okay? So our first crack at books basically is very similar to a traditional textbook. From there, though, we thought, hey, we can continue to work on this. We opted to help students truly learn each individual skill by breaking these original original FlexBooks down into bite-sized chunks called concepts. We released a new line of books with the word concepts in the title. So while they covered the same core content as the first FlexBooks, chapters in these concept books generally had more sections with a single concept that students were intended to learn. This also allowed us to do some updates. One, it made it even easier to customize our FlexBooks, as you can mix and match at a more specific level. And then two, it helps students learn any specific skill or concept. We created matching concept pages with multiple ways, or what we call modalities, to learn. These included our adaptive practice, our videos, our study guides, and eventually our simulations that are currently available for physics and now chemistry, and our Plix interactives. So if you're looking to not only use our FlexBooks, but to also assign practice and even our interactives, these newer concept FlexBooks allow you to do that with one section to one concept correlation. Okay, so just to confuse you even more, possibly, we just launched in August. So this is a brand new launch, what we're calling FlexBooks 2.0. This is a FlexBooks platform, and this was designed with the idea of true exploratory and interactive learning in mind. We brought digital practice and related modalities into the same interface. We included even more videos and Plix or simulations cleanly embedded within the content, and even created quick interactives and practice questions as part of the learning in our newest Common Core Standards Math FlexBooks. So if you're ready to go all digital and immerse your students in varied ways of learning, you definitely want to check out the new books and the new platform they're on. Okay, so digest that for a second, and then Katie's going to show you how to get started in finding these and which book might be right for you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to actually steal the screen from Lindsay and go straight to our site so you can see what that looks like on our site. So hopefully you can all see this nice little homepage. I'm logged in as a Jumpstart demo account, and we'll talk about how easy it is to find the right content, particularly FlexBooks. So I'm going to actually start, though, before I start with the whole FlexBook, I often have teachers kind of say, FlexBooks are great, but I have to teach tomorrow. So, you know, today's Wednesday for most of us in this world. Some of you guys have bumped into Thursday, but in general, you guys have to go in and you have to teach tomorrow in class. And so let's say you had to pull up a topic. So I was looking for something on heat and temperature. You could simply search for that. So that would pull up a concept. It would pull up the resources for a particular thing. You could actually filter. So if you're looking for grade level, they're ordered currently by the number of results that show up. So there's the most results in grade 10, but you can always pick and choose the ones you want there. You can filter by subject. And then what I love is that you could actually filter by type of learning. So if you were looking for textbooks that included something on there, you would just click this FlexBook textbook option. And it looks like there's stuff in physics and a couple other physics books. This is our note right here. We were talking about kind of that original physics book versus the physics concepts book. So that one is the one that's broken down a little bit more into those bite-sized chunks. And it has that corresponding practice that goes with that. And then we have a couple of additional resources. We also have at the top of that was our first thing on our concepts. And these are those concept pages. So you could actually find that content, and I'll go to there in a second. But I also want to point out 3 headers within the search result before we do anything. One is our CK12 content header. And this is all of the resources that we have worked with either in partnership or individually built with contractors and experts and all those people we've talked about. And those are what we continue to vet and update. You are welcome to click over to this community contributed tab and explore resources there, especially if you're looking for resources for, let's say, social studies or English, which we don't really cover within our core STEM content. Feel free to explore this. But there are about 196,000 variations of our textbooks on our website, and about 6,000 or more of them are published and accessible for others. So we don't continually update every page in there to make sure that the content is accurate within that community contributed piece. But we do keep that separate so that you know that if you stay within the CK12 content, you can expect the quality content that we provide. And then if you want to vet your own content, you're welcome to explore that others in the community have published. The last piece is that if you're looking to search your own library, so let's say in here, it looks like I included part of the People's Physics book. I added it to my library for one reason or another, and that I might find within my library. So just know that that's another way to quickly search your library. Just search like you would anything else and go into your library. But let's look at this for a second. So we're going to go into this first thing, that concept page. And this is what we were talking about in terms of supporting our learning with different types of learning. So here is the section from a textbook. This read would be kind of your traditional section. If I click into there, it gives me text that students would learn from. It might or might not include interactives embedded or a video embedded and some review questions and maybe even an explore more option or resources. So that's kind of your core text. So that might be helpful, but let's say you have a textbook and you're just looking to supplement that with something. This is still a great place to look. You can look at our simulations. Our Plix are another type of interactive that we have, maybe some videos, and then this matching practice, or even an application that relates it to the real world. So you'll see all sorts of different types of resources that allow students to learn that particular concept. And I know we had a question kind of in there about resources for students with special needs. This is a great option, and so even if you're not using the full textbook for students in that regard, you could help them learn through one of these other learning modalities. And that might be a great resource for you. We'll also talk throughout this webinar about customizing our content at the book and even this kind of read level right here. And I know a lot of teachers that work with students with special needs will take content and strip it down to what they need or rewrite it at a reading level that matches their students. And those might be all different ways you could use our content and address those areas. So that's an option kind of if you're just looking for a particular topic, you don't know where else to start. Our search bar is a great first place to do that. Another option, kind of if you want to go find stuff, and this CK12 logo is one of my favorite links on our whole site because it takes me back to our homepage. So anytime I want to kind of start fresh, I can go back there. And so now I might want to try to talk about something and think about building multiple concepts together. Maybe I'm planning out a unit and I want to think about what goes together and I don't want to have to build them all out from scratch. So let's say I was building something on measurement. I could scroll down here, and this is the subjects I've tagged for myself, but we actually can show all subjects, and you'll see all of the different resources we have. Kind of the main math science ones have practice, and some of these other English and alternative topic areas have just a basic FlexBook and don't have practice because that's not where our concentration is at this time. But if I click into a branch, so let's say I take measurement as my option, I can look at concepts and I can look at FlexBooks. And we're going to go into the FlexBooks in a minute, but let's start with the concepts. So if I want to talk about unit conversion, it might be helpful to talk about multiple topics of unit conversion all together in that unit. And so this is a great option to kind of build out your lessons as a whole unit. So I could click into this customary units of length. It would take me to the matching concept page. Here we have text and interactives and practice that we're working off of. I could go back. I could also do the next one, click on customer units and mass and capacity. And once again, I'm taken to a page with multiple resources. This one has a video added to it as well. So I could use that branch area to browse sections and topics together. I would just kind of expand this, and anything that's this nice little teal clickable link would take you to that matching concept page that I showed you for heat and temperature and just now for units of measurement. So that's a great option for kind of building pieces together.
Katie, while you were just talking about that concept page, a user just said, can I assign sections of a FlexBook, simulations, anything else on that concept page through Google Classroom? I know that's not what the session's about, but if you just want to remind them what's available to assign out through Learning Management System.
Yeah, sure. You can assign almost all of our core modality types out. So for example, the one that I was showing you for heat and temperature that has kind of a whole bunch of different ones, that's actually a great example. Let me pull it up one more time, because depending on what it was, our physics and chem are the ones that would have those simulations as well. So this is just kind of a perfect topic to explain multiple things. So all 6 of these modality types right here are assignable to your students. You can assign reads, which are that section of the text. You could always share a chapter or a book, But if you're looking for a student report, you'd be looking for that read or that sim. Simulations and Plix are accessible, videos, practice, and our real-world applications. Those are the different types of learning that you can actually assign. You might see an occasional lesson plan as a teacher or an activity or something like that. Those are more just additional resources and not built in as assignable options. And I'm just going to click into this read right here, and you can see for Google Classroom and for CK12 classes, this assign a class option will allow you to assign it directly there. And we're going to cover more of that in some of those assignment ones, but just know it's right there. If you're using other learning management systems, you might have to pull content from within Canvas or Schoology, so it's a little different flow. But yeah.
We do have several webinars coming up this month that are on our webinars page about assignments, about Google Classroom. So Katie, you know, she's doing a great job of answering a few questions here, but if you guys want to know a lot more about this, we go in depth later this month during those webinars.
Great. So let's talk about kind of that book level piece. So let's pick another area, let's say algebra. And this, once again, gives you all your concepts as you're looking through here. It might even have options for that Plix, which are interactives, or study guides from there. And then I can click over to this FlexBook textbook tab. And depending on whether it's a branch that covers both middle school and high school, or let's say calculus would just be high school, you might have tabs for both middle school and high school. So you'll see some different book options in either one. I can click over and see the high school book ones. So this is one where let's just kind of think about this for a second. So we have here a bunch of different options. We have our original algebra book. I think this Algebra 1 second edition, we actually did a second edition of that original kind of lessons that had multiple skills within any lesson. They match very similar to that traditional printed textbook. Then we took that book and we converted it to an Algebra 1 concepts book. And that's broken down and split up so that it correlates one-to-one with those concept pages like the one I showed you on HEAT and matches all of those assignable modalities. You might see some other options. You might see an honors version right here. We have Algebra 2 with trig and Algebra 2 with trig concepts. And our newest resources are Interactive Algebra 1 for Common Core and Algebra 2 for Common Core. Those are both new resources that have embedded interactives. These are all our kind of still within that environment that is our traditional FlexBook platform. So I can access all of these pieces. I can even see my Spanish books down below. And I could check for levels, basic or advanced, and all languages, English or the Spanish ones. But once again, as Lindsay showed you, I could translate any of our text pages into another language using that Google Translate option for students to get a rough translation. I've seen kids where their computer's in English and their phone is in Spanish or Portuguese or something else, and that's helping them kind of learn that vocabulary in English and understand what's happening there. So you can definitely see different pieces for that. Now, these two interactive books were built in our original platform, but they're actually also now available in our 2.0 platform. And that's something that kind of Lindsay talked about as that third level of FlexBooks we worked on. So I'm going to go back to that homepage. And I'm going to click this. Here's our little advertisement because we just barely launched FlexBooks 2.0. And I can click Try It Now. And in here, I can scroll down and you can see that these books are also available. So the Interactive Algebra 1, Interactive Algebra 2 books, as well as kind of some redone science books. Our physics books have that science text embedded, or the simulations embedded directly within them. And so there's a couple of different options in terms of finding them. I'm going to show you just what this environment looks like for a second, but this is our digital environment. So if you have requirements for printed text, then at this point in time, this is not where you'd want to go. You'd want to be looking more at the original books. And we're going to do all of our editing skills today in the original books, but the editing process is very, very similar. So if I click Interactive Algebra 2, and I want to start with a topic, let's say rational and radical equations, I can go in, you can see other ways to learn, and this is that FlexBooks 2.0 environment. So my practice is right here. I could preview that practice. It takes my students right there. Try it out. I can click stop. I can see kind of those other related resources here, different parts, a study guide, a video, a real-world application. You can see kind of the scope and sequence of what's happening. This is the chapter we're in. These are chapters following that. And then if I actually look at the text itself, you'll start seeing these embedded interactives. And you'll find those in kind of that newest interactive line that's currently also available in our original part. But for the most part, these were built for this new interactive environment and allows students to actually interact with the text directly here. So we're saying, okay, we're going to multiply by that and divide by that. So you can kind of see what's happening and work your way through. And so that's why these are not available offline, because they're really optimized for that interactivity as you're working your way through. So let's do one more thing. We're going to go back. Once again, that CK12 logo takes me back to our homepage. And there's kind of two other ways to find content on our site. So notice that this says switch to student version. That means I'm logged in as a teacher. If for some reason you don't see when you scroll down stuff on our certified educator program or the schools icon here, just make sure you swap so that you're in the teacher view. But if I click on schools, this is a great resource, especially if you have updated state standards that you need to try to match. So I am currently physically in New York City, so automatically New York City popped up, or New York State popped up as the state that we're working off of. Our main office is out in California, so I could check out schools that might have taken our content and republished it underneath there. And then I'm going to use Texas. I know we saw a little bit of that in that video. And I'm going to go down to El Paso because they've done some fantastic work. So this is El Paso Independent, and you'll see a variety of resources here. You'll see stuff that includes anatomy and physiology and integrated physics and chemistry, where they pulled some of our resources. But you'll also see resources such as government. We don't have a government book. They created that book using open resources, making sure it fit within our license, pulling other pieces that go with that. And so they've published resources even beyond that math and science content. Once again, we do not vet the accuracy of every single thing in that community contributed place. So feel free to explore those resources. And if you like them, you are welcome to use them and customize them like anything else. But you do need to realize that you're using user-created content and not CK12 created content if you're accessing things on the school page. If I go back to our homepage, we can go down here, and there's kind of a couple other things. You can explore our interactives. We have a whole webinar on those shortly, so definitely go check those out soon. Adaptive practice, we have a webinar on that next week, so feel free to explore those pieces. And right above that is a standards-aligned FlexBook textbook. So if you are looking for resources that are aligned to kind of the Common Core or NGSS topic standards, our newest interactive CCSS books were built specifically for the ability to kind of browse those pieces and understand the philosophy behind them, but this gives you some correlation. Or you could search by topic under standards. So I could say Common Core Math or Next Generation Science. And then this would say, okay, this is your standard, and these concepts that we have all relate to that particular standard. So if I click on that Eclipse place, it will take me to that concept page and teach me all about that part. So I think with that, maybe we'll stop for a few minutes, see if we have any questions, and we can go from there.
Well, I think our team is being pretty efficient answering some of the questions. Star has been on typing answers to some of our users. We asked you a couple during the presentation, Katie, so I don't know. I think we could probably just continue on at this point, and then just a reminder to our users to type in questions in the Q&A as you guys have them.
Sounds good. So I know, let me pull up one thing because I know that we want to kind of show some pieces here on our CC BY-NC licensing before we continue. So let me just pull that up.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. People, as we're talking about FlexBooks and it being customizable, a lot of times people want to know if our content is protected by any copyright. So Katie is pulling up right now what we call the Creative Commons license that requires you to say that the content came from us and that is for non-commercial purposes. So other than that, our content is free for you to use. You just have to give appropriate credits and not sell it. So maybe you can add to that, Katie, what you're showing them here.
Yeah, sure. So this is just like for your benefit. all of our content is being licensed out from there. And it says right there, our whole goal of building this platform was to allow you to customize our resources to tailor make them for your students. Whether those students are in special education, are an English language learner, or are a student in any type of school across the world, we really wanted to give you the ability to make those as tailor-made for your class. And so we put basically next to no restrictions on them. We said, feel free to mix and match them, transform them, do whatever you want, except sell them, and you need to make sure you attribute correctly. So there's a couple times in today's presentation and in our advanced FlexBook editing place where I'll talk about crediting appropriately, and so definitely make sure that anything that you're taking and mixing and using, you are citing accordingly. So I think with that, it sounds like we probably want to talk about that customization. So let me click back over and we will go into what it would be like to customize. So I showed you about 5 different ways to access content. And any single one of them we can use to kind of customize and work with something. So let's pick a new topic. Let's pick trig as a new topic. And I'm going to start by customizing at the book level. You can pick and choose individual pieces and add them to a FlexBook that you're building. But if you're going to build multiple topics together, it's usually easier to start at the larger level and just quickly delete things you don't want versus the alternative. So let's pick this trigonometry concepts book. If I take this, I get access to my table of contents for the book. Here's an offline reader that we'll talk about. Here's the ability to add to my library or share with classes. And right here is the word customize. In that 2.0 platform, your options were open and assign and customize. So you can see the same customize option, it's just a little different layout. But once you click customize, you get entered into this same exact environment for editing. So just know that all of the stuff that I'm talking about right now in terms of editing is valid across both types of books. So the first thing I usually do is I would say you might want to rename your book. We often hear for, I used to teach at a school where the initials are LMK and then the high school. So I could rename that for that school. And then in my library, I would be very clear that this is the book I was working on for my school versus one that CK12 might have within our system. So go ahead and rename. Let's say this is a summer course or something short and I'm not going to get to the polar system. I can simply delete that whole section by clicking that little X. I can remove it and it's gone. If I needed to add it back in, I could always find the original version in the CK12 book and add it back into this textbook for a future iteration. I can reorder sections. So let's say I wanted to talk about inverse functions before identities. I could take that and move that whole chapter, and it will renumber everything, including all of the lessons inside that chapter, so that everything is labeled correctly. And I remember when I taught one year and my kids were so tired of functions that we went into actually trig for a little bit of time. And then we went back into functions. And so we did chapters 1, 2, 4, and then 3. And they were totally annoyed that they had to go back and do chapter 3. Whereas here, I could have just immediately reordered the textbook and then had them do them in successive order the way I taught that particular year. If I wanted to move stuff between chapters, I could do the same thing. I would just open both chapters. And I could drag from here up into this chapter as well. Let me put that actually in that chapter. And so you can kind of mix and match all of your pieces as you're working your way through. I can even edit the chapter level content. So if I click on this little edit option at the chapter level, so let's kind of bring this down so you can see that we're working at the chapter level pretty easily. And I could edit any content here. So I could update the title or a description. I could add an intro or a summary or change that. I could upload files such as an answer key. You will often find answer keys for our FlexBooks in the resources tab at the chapter or table of contents level for a book. So that's a really good thing to note. And you can kind of add your own answer keys if you change things. And then the details is a place where you'll see those attributions. So these are all the writers who worked on this book so far. And if you're adding new content and updating pieces for this chapter, you can add that piece in there. But if you want to make sure that you don't kind of remove everyone that was currently working on it, unless you're starting completely from scratch. So we can go in there. You could do the same kind of details piece on the book level as well, or the resources tab for answer keys there. And then we can talk about kind of adding pieces. So I can add content in a number of different ways. I could add a new chapter. So this would be just a test chapter to show you what this looks like. And I could fill in all those other pieces. But if I am adding anything new to my FlexBook, it will automatically show up at the bottom of that particular resource. And this is true when I'm adding reads to textbooks, when I'm adding chapters to textbooks, when I'm adding practice questions to a quiz on CK12. If you add something new, you will find it at the bottom. And then you can move it wherever you want it to be. But that just kind of helps you figure out where it is. It's not lost in the middle, and then you can put it where it belongs. You could write a new modality, which would be kind of the same as editing a new read, and we'll go into editing for a second. Or you could search CK12. You could actually search across our stuff, and you could say, I want something on the Pythagorean theorem, and add that from here. And you can find stuff from CK12 content, or I could click over to my library and say, do I have anything on there already? And these would kind of add pieces. So I'm going to add this particular section versus a whole book that I'm working off of. And this particular section I could easily drag into maybe our introduction chapter, which looks like it might already have Pythagorean theorem pieces in it. So all options to kind of add content. I'll show you one other way outside of edit mode, but I want to just stick within edit mode for a little bit. So if I want to edit any of these particular sections, so let's click on this one. That pencil edit icon will take me to the text itself. So let's have it load that particular section. Once again, I can choose to leave the title as is, or I could add anything else that I wanted after that or change the title accordingly. I'm going to save that, and this bumps you into the CK12 editor. The only thing different between this and the new 2.0 platform is that you'll have one extra tab besides resources and details, and that's the related modalities, because you can actually hand tag modalities to that concept. So that's the only difference there, but everything else from here is the same. You can actually look at the text. You can change the level of text itself. You can make all your general, I can make this bold or italics or underlined or whatever I wanted that to be. Kind of all of your standard edit, subscript, superscript font. I can even change the colors that I'm working off of. So all of your basic edits there. A couple of notes, you can upload an image. So you'll see there are some images in here. That's covered way more in the advanced editing piece. We'll talk about the different parts. But just make sure when you do so, and I think this flow is changing slightly, but once again, that source and credit is super important. So make sure you're adding that in if you upload images, and that they all fall under that Creative Commons non-commercial 3.0 licensing. So that's one thing you want to make sure is that you're using content and images that fit within the license for our site. You can also upload media. So you could kind of embed media if you wanted to embed a YouTube video. So right here, you can click on that and edit it. See, it looks like that's a video right there. So all sorts of options for working our way through. And even you'll see math editing text here, or I could add a new equation right here, and this is our little math editor. And once again, all of these pieces that I just commented on, that images, this math editor, the videos, are all things fully covered in our advanced editing piece. So definitely check that one out if you are interested in doing kind of more of those higher level updates within your content. So let's say I made some changes. I have two options. One, I could keep this as a draft, or two, I could finalize this. You could discard draft if you decided you didn't actually want to make those changes. But in general, the finalize and the keep as draft are the two big things. So really, the keep as draft is for that day where you started making edits and you have half a sentence here and nothing makes sense, and then someone called you into a parent-teacher meeting and you just need to save it and leave it there. You don't want anyone else to see those updates. That would be that keep as draft option. As long as it's coherent and you want your students or those currently who have access to that book via a link to see your updates, in order for them to see them, you need to finalize. So I'm going to finalize this draft. And that then means, okay, this section is now available within the book. Everyone can see it. You'll see because it's one of a concepts book, it has our attached practice, and you can kind of work your way through there. If you do not finalize and you leave it as a draft, then only you can see it. But the word final on CK12 is never really final, because I can always click this little edit option on the left, And I can go back and I can make more updates next week or next month or next year or whenever that happens to be. So you have plenty of options, but the finalize just means you're pushing that information out. Now, we're going to go back for a sec because I don't actually want to edit it any further. And the first thing you want to see is that as I work my way through, I'm looking at this section, and this has a unique URL at the top. So I have a user ID number in there. It has the title of my book, the section. I just finalized it, so it even has a revision number in it. But I can share that URL for probably the whole book is your best option if you're sharing a content with users, because then they can access it with any updates in there. But I can just copy and paste that URL. So that's one option for sharing. Within our original books and our concept books, I could publish this. And by publishing it, it would then be something I could put on that schools page. It would also be something that it would show up in search. So only things that you've published show up in search. But remember that if you share a URL, someone could share it beyond that. So anything you do still has to fall under our license. You could, at the book or the chapter or the section level, share this with your CK12 class. So I could click on the Share with Classes, and it would show me all my CK12 classes that I could share this with as a resource. I could, let's say I went into a chapter, or even the whole book. I can click this Add to FlexBook Textbook, and I could say I want to take that and I want to add that section into one of these books that I'm already working on. So if I do this one already, I think it's going to tell me it's already part of that selected textbook, so I don't need to add it again. But I can add anything in there. And this is one really nice way to kind of browse CK12 and add to your textbook. This will then show up at the bottom of that textbook. But in order to do that, you need to be in browse mode and not edit mode. And I'll go through that just a little bit more in a second, but just kind of pointing that out there. Because I customized it, I could download this, and I can even access this in my offline reader. And this is very much like the app that you could download on the App Store or Google Play Store. And this allows me, because I'm using Chrome, to download this whole book I used offline or any particular section. So I just was at a school the other day, and all of their students in the high school have Chromebooks, and some of them do not have internet access at home. But using this option, they could download that book and still access it at home. If there were interactives, those wouldn't necessarily work, but all of the text would still be there. So going back to this book, another option is this little green share plane, and that's actually an option across our site. You could even share a whole branch page. And this is something that you could email, you could share on Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, or even to Google Classroom. But please remember that this is a share option. If you want grades and you want assignments covered within Google Classroom, do not use this workflow. Go directly into a section and choose to assign it to class. This is the way you assign content. So just kind of keep that option split there. But plenty of different ways to share resources with students, plenty of different ways to customize. As I said, this is the basics. So I just kind of wanted to show you a brief, quick overview and have you start exploring. And then if you want to dig in deep and understand kind of more of those detailed pieces, then you'd want to actually be able to go in there and work your way through. So I think Lindsay stole the screen back just to kind of reiterate a couple of these big pieces for us. Kind of just thinking through, if you are excited about this, you want to get together a team of teachers to work together to build your customized FlexBook, the first thing you want to do is form those teams. Regardless of how you do that, make sure that one person is kind of the point person for making sure that stuff is aligned the right way, in the right order. Everyone knows which section they're working on. And then that comment that I just made where you have a tab that you're editing in and then you need to move out of edit mode and go browse separately. You don't want to have an edited tab open and another tab open and you're adding stuff and then you save an old version and you overwrite your new work. So that's, just keep one clean tab. You're either in edit mode or you're in browse mode. And that will help limit a ton of confusion. We are not Google Docs. You cannot collaboratively edit the same section at the same time. We have all of these other built-in features that accessibility, interactivity kind of pieces. And so one person should be in a book at a time. So if you create a generic like science at whatever high school account so that the owner of that book has one clean copy and that is the book that is being updated and you don't have a copy and someone else has a copy and you're trying to figure out what part goes where, totally fine. But just make sure only one person is working on the book at any one time. And then you can always incorporate other modalities. You can use hyperlinks to get there, or you could actually embed our practice. You can embed, I think the embed codes for Sims are now live. And so you can kind of see different pieces there as you're working through. But once again, that's save your book and exit edit mode, and then go explore, so that when you click add, it works cleanly. And then the last thing you want to do is get feedback from the teachers who are using these books. If that's not you and you're on a curriculum team, talk to those teachers, figure out what's working, what's not working. Lindsay and I visited a school last spring, and they printed versions of their text that fall, and they said they're already out of date. We have to print a whole new set next year, because we figured out all the things we want to tweak just a little bit for next fall. So keep that in mind as you go.
Okay, now's a good time to type in any final Q&A questions that you might have. One is about our Certified Educator program, which I'm going to touch on here. So we referenced it several times that we're running a bunch of webinars. This is our lineup for the rest of September and October. Next week, we're doing Getting Started with CK12 Adaptive Practice and Assignments. So we're going to spend an hour talking about just the power of the adaptive practice tool, and then how to do these assignments, whether that's through CK12 classes or through Google Classroom, or if you're working with a different LMS. In October, we're talking about our CK12 simulations and our interactives. We've got our colleagues, Katie S. and Sonia, who are the interactives queens, who are coming on to do demonstrations for you. And then we have a short webinar, shorter in duration, 20, 30 minutes maybe, on CK12 and Google Classroom, if you want to dive deep on just the functionality of how we integrate with Google Classroom. And then we're running the advanced FlexBook editing session. If you were intrigued by what you saw today, we're giving you a little over a month to kind of get in there, start working with a FlexBook, and then come back for advanced FlexBook editing, where we take your FlexBook game to the next level. You can register for any of these at ck12.org/webinars. And then we do post the recordings on that same webinars page. So you will see a list of different topics and find a current webinar that matches at ck12.org/webinar. Today's webinar will be uploaded sometime tomorrow once we get the recording up on YouTube. So you can look for that. We told you earlier, we have a reference page. If you just need to open that up, download it, think about it later, you can do it at at tinyurl.com/ck12flexbooks, and that's the printable reference page for you. So our Certified Educator program, Ashley's question in Q&A right now says, I would like to become a certified educator. I saw there was a program this summer. Is it only possible during the summer, or can I become a certified educator during the school year? So we run a summer intensive program that is in the month of July, and we certified hundreds of educators this summer over a couple weeks of live webinars and then a few on-demand webinar sessions. And currently, our program is kind of contained to the summer months, but to accommodate our users like you, Ashley, and anybody else who's on the webinar today, we track your attendance, and we can send you the assignment that matches this webinar, because to become a certified educator, you do need to complete some matching assignments with the webinars. But we will keep track of what you do during the school year, and you can start kind of piecing together your certification over the school year and into next summer's program if you need to. So short answer is it just takes a little bit longer. We don't have as much choice. You saw that we have about 4 webinars coming up in the next month. But we do give you credit so you can start working towards certification. You can find more information at ck12.org/certify. Jumpstart at ck12.org is an email address that Katie and I man. So if you have any sort of certified educator program questions or questions about this webinar, you're welcome to email jumpstart at ck12.org. This is a feedback form, tinyurl.com/ck12webinar1819. This is a feedback form that we're using for the school year that is helpful if you have just 3 minutes to get on and tell us how we did today, and give us a little information of other topics you would like to see coming up. If you have suggestions on other times to run webinars, let us know on that form. I think it's all being posted in the chat window right now. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. Again, jumpstart at ck12.org. If you need an assignment to go with this webinar because you're interested in the Certified Educator program, shoot us an email to jumpstart at ck12.org. Some of you might need, a little documentation from us to say that you were on today's webinar to submit to your school or your school district. If you need something like that, email us at jumpstart@ck12.org and we'll see what we can do for you. So we have reached the hour mark. Anybody who needs to head off, you're welcome to head off. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it back over to Katie, and she's going to continue to answer questions as long as we have them.
Thanks, Lindsay. So once again, if you are looking for documentation, please email jumpstart@ck12.org. That will help kind of take care of that piece. And then we had a question about, do I have to get certified every year? The answer to that is no. We make your certification valid for 2 years to start with. And then for example, this summer we had a brush up session for those that did certification last year. We kind of talked about what the updates were for our site. So the idea of making it expire is that our platform has changed drastically in the last few years that I've been working at CK12. And we want to make sure that you have an idea of what has been updated and your knowledge of CK12 isn't multiple years old and doesn't match what's currently on that site. So you would need to kind of refresh those skills, but not do the full program again if you wanted to renew your certification. And then we have a question here about, do we have a printable cheat sheet to help get you started? That tiny URL, maybe Lindsay can go back just to that session resource page and the tiny URL at the top of there on the keynote. That is your cheat sheet for this session. So it gives you kind of the basics on FlexBooks. Let's go to, there we go. Why choose a FlexBook? It has kind of a couple key pieces on editing, of ways to find the 5 different ways I talked to you guys about. There were so many to find content on our site by browsing or searching or branch pages or whatnot. And we can go from there. So definitely check that out. We have one of those for all of our core webinars. So we will continue to share those and kind of make those more accessible as we revamp our Certified Educator program. But you definitely have a chance to use that as a cheat sheet for this particular session. So it looks like we managed to keep up with questions throughout this webinar. If you guys have no more questions, you're more than welcome to sign off. We'll stay on for another minute or so in case anyone's frantically typing for a second and wants to toss one in there. Feel free to do that, and we will see if we can answer that. But otherwise, enjoy your evening. So it looks like we have no more questions. I would say please feel free to join us for our getting started with practice and assignments next week. I know a lot of the questions that came in had to do with assignments. Once again, you are welcome to use our content as is. You do not need to customize it, but you are welcome to customize it from anything from just renaming it all the way down to changing the text itself within there, as long as you are staying within our license and you are not selling our content. So feel free to use our resources, and we hope to see you again on a future webinar. Thanks so much.